Good afternoon and welcome to our sixth seminar in our Going Digital series, Turning to Technology in Latin America's Pandemic Response. Today's event is co-sponsored by Amazon Web Services. My name is Benjamin Gadan. I'm the Deputy Director of the Latin American Program here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Our Going Digital series, as you should all know by now, features CEOs, senior policymakers, and other experts discussing the challenges and opportunities of digitalization in Latin America, a process that has dramatically accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic and a potential driver of the region's economic diversification and its post-pandemic economic recovery. Our inaugural Going Digital event focused on the expansion of financial technology, or fintech, in Latin America. The second looked at how to solve Latin America's shortage of digital workers. Our third event looked at the future of digital trade in Latin America. The fourth examined privacy and cybersecurity issues in the region. And our last and most recent Going Digital dialogue highlighted challenges and opportunities in remote learning in Latin America. I mention all this because all 5 of those webcasts are available on our website, as will this one following its conclusion. Today, we will explore how Latin America's governments have also adopted digital tools during the pandemic and at a pace that did not seem previously possible. To participate in today's discussion, please send your questions on Twitter in a direct message or by tagging @LATAMPROG, that's @LATAMPROG. You can also email us to laplap@wilsoncenter.org. That's laplap@wilsoncenter.org. Feel free, starting immediately, to send us the ideas and questions that you have related to this subject. The pandemic has had a devastating public health and economic impact in Latin America. And for nearly 20 months now, it has upended the rhythms of social and economic life. It has similarly disrupted the way governments operate in Latin America, both the way they provide traditional public services amid social distancing and how they deliver emergency pandemic measures. In response, Latin America's governments, including many who rarely venture to the cutting edge of digital technology, have made strides towards e-government, including through online tools that have helped provide financial support to millions of Latin Americans who previously had little contact with traditional banking services. Governments also belatedly built secure digital identification systems so citizens can now verify their identities online and safely and securely interact with their governments. These steps, of course, were no help to the millions of Latin Americans on the wrong side of the digital divide, an issue that we have previously addressed and that we will return to in the future. But for Latin American communities with reasonable internet access, the emergence of digital public services has been a godsend. Region-wide, the proportion of citizens who transact with the government online rose from 21% pre-pandemic to 39% today, according to a recent report from the Inter-American Development Bank. Now, in part, that shift reflects changes in the public's relationship with the internet and the embrace of digital technologies by millions of Latin Americans who had avoided these systems earlier. But it is also evidence of an explosion in government electronic services. After all, as recently as 2017, only Mexico, Brazil, and Uruguay offered online options for at least half of government service transactions. A lot has changed since then, but there is still a long way to go. Many government websites for Latin Americans remain very tough to navigate, especially for users with little experience online. The region's digital agencies are too often underfunded and have inadequate personnel, something we'll discuss in great detail with some of the leaders of those agencies that are with us today. Governments in Latin America still excessively rely upon in-person transactions, a burden even in non-pandemic times. Half of government workers in Latin America say they have been unable to perform critical tasks remotely, a result of both underinvestment in digital government hardware and software, but also insufficient training of the public workforce. For example, only a third of the region's civil servants report having been trained for telework, and most do not own a government-provided laptop. There are, however, many standouts in Latin America, including those who have demonstrated the promise of digital technologies for more accessible and efficient public administration, both during the pandemic and into the future. In today's discussion, we'll hear from 3 of these leaders, whose innovations have kept the trains running on time during a period of unimaginable challenge and hardship, and who have set up their countries for a more rapid post-pandemic recovery and economic diversification. Among these e-leaders are the builders of Peru's central government websites, which have seen a 30% increase in transactions during the pandemic, and Peru's innovative Datatón para Prevenir la Tercera Ola, which involves the public, universities, experts from the private sector and civil society in the development of digital tools to slow the spread of COVID-19. In Brazil, e-leaders have digitized more than 300 government services during the pandemic and created 34 entirely new digital services that hadn't been available before this period, helping Brazil leap up the rankings in the closely watched Digital Riser report. In April of 2021, e-leaders in Panama made it the first country in the region to sign a digital country partnership with MasterCard, greatly expanding financial inclusion, including for small and medium-sized businesses. To discuss these and other compelling examples of the digitalization of public services in Latin America, I'm delighted to introduce a fantastic panel of experts, including Peru's Secretary of Government and Digital Transformation, Marushka Chocobar, who joins us from Lima. Panama's Administrator of the National Authority for Government Innovation, Luis Oliva, who joins us from Panama City, and the Deputy Secretary of Digital Government for Brazil, Luana Roncarati, who joins us from Brasilia. I want to thank all three of you for participating, and again, thank our audience for being here for this conversation. A very quick programming note, Marushka will be speaking in Spanish, but for those of you who are not Spanish speakers, fear not, afterward, we'll be immediately posting a version of this event that will include interpretation in both Spanish and English. Thank you again for being here. I'll remind you how you can send us your questions again throughout the conversation, but please do not be shy in doing so. I want to start the conversation with you, Luana, if I can, and ask you about the pre-existing conditions in Brazil when it came to digital government. What tools did you already have? What staff in your office already existed and were trained? What ability did Brazil have at the beginning of the pandemic to deal with this sudden onslaught of demand for accessing government services online?
Good afternoon. Well, thank you, Benjamin. I would like to thank you all for the invitation and for the opportunity to be here with you. I would like to compliment my colleagues, Marushka and Luis. It's my pleasure to meet you and to share this panel with you. Well, Benjamin, I would like to start pointing out some figures about Brazil. Well, I am sure that most of you know that we have an enormous population and we have the fourth largest connected population in the world. Then it means that we already have a very active people interacting in the web. We had from these 140 million people, we had 99% of them using smartphones, and we hold a second position in the use of social media in the world. That means we had a huge population, and most of our population very eager and active in the social media and in the web. And being aware of that, the federal government in Brazil have been putting a lot of efforts into digital transformation even before pandemic. We started mainly in 2019 when the Secretary of Digital Government became this secretary focused on the mission to transform public services and to provide most of them online. And we started with this task mainly in 2019. And by then we were still very aware of the many international organizations' recommendations towards this subject, and we were planning to move from e-government approach to a fully digital government approach, which means that we were planning and working to not only use ICT to enable internal procedures to foster transparency and other more internal things in government, to a more open and user-centric and more transformative view of ICT and their use inside government. So we were working towards this main goal to transform and to promote this deeper transformation in the way people interact with government in Brazil. And in 2020, we launched the digital government strategy that brought and presented the main guidelines that we were supposed to follow to transform services in Brazil. And we had we were supposed to be citizen-centric. We were supposed to be integrated, or that means that we were supposed to integrate data and services to reduce costs, to provide a better experience to users. We were supposed to be smart, to try to be more data-driven and to anticipate the needs of our users. We also was looking to be reliable and to be proactively respect privacy and cope with all the threats that digital transformation might bring to us. And we were also focused to be open and transparent and also efficient, and to try to provide the best services possible, and also reducing costs. Then we had all this framework in which we were already working since 2019, and we launched it publicly on 2020. And what have we done? What have we accomplished so far? And well, as you mentioned, now we have unified all the federal government services in a single window portal, gov.br. If you don't know, please access it. It's a very interesting one. And we have 4,700 services provided there, unified there. Only federal public services are related to this number. And out of them, we have 71% of those services online provided. So we have increased a lot the figures that we had before. We have more than 500 million page views per month in this portal, and we also have now in September 2021, we have more than 113 million citizens connected with their accounts at gov.br. And I think these numbers are very, very important to show here. And I would like to also mention our evolution. So for you to have an idea of how we have evolved and how we are increasing our digital service provision, we had in 2019 52% of them provided online, and now in 2 years later, and with the pandemic, we have 71% of them. And another number that I would like to bring here is that with this public services transformation, we have saved more than 3 billion reais per year, not only considering the cost for the state, but also for the society, because we can measure the impact that not staying in lines, not having to go to an agency to request for a benefit. What is the impact economically? What is the economical impact for the society with all these main transformation that we have undergone so far?
Excellent, and many thanks, Luana. Mariuszka, Luana lays out a lot of benefits from digital governance that are unrelated to the pandemic, and makes the case that, we've heard for a long time about Latin America, that there were great efficiencies and money saving that you could have realized by digitizing services in normal times. And yet it did take the pandemic in many places to push governments to finally take a lot of these steps. I'm curious, Marushka, in Peru, whether a lot of the work you were able to do over the last year and a half came from investments like Luana was describing that came before the pandemic, or whether you found yourself mostly racing to catch up once the public was finally ready to demand these services online.
Muchísimas gracias, Benjamín. En primer lugar, quiero agradecerle.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. First off, I'd like to thank Wilson Center for inviting me, and I'd like to extend my greetings to Gina, Luana. This is a female panel, indeed, and I'd like to extend my thanks to every person in Peru and in Latin American countries. I feel that we've been very resilient before the health crisis. Everyone that has been directly involved in carrying out the different actions in digital transportation. It's very interesting, Luana's point. I feel that from the beginning or even before the health crisis, our countries have been going towards that track to make technology available to the citizens. In this path, before March 16th, before the first case of COVID was detected in Peru, we were already in a path. We were focused on 4 main areas. And going and touching to your question, at that time, and even before, we were always working with the international cooperation with their support. There were joint efforts from our different partners from each of the areas that are responsible for digital transformation. So we focus on 4 parts. First, strengthening the digital governance. 2 months before March 16th, that is when the first case of COVID in Peru was detected. So we enacted 2 laws, 2 acts that empowered this governance framework in digital transformation, because that digital transformation is stated in an act, in a law for technology and data, because they create value, economic value for people, for citizens. So there were 2 passed laws for digital economy, connectivity, digital education, and everything involved within the scope of the government services. So economy, education, and digital economy. So the Secretary of Governance in the PCM, for the ones who are listening to us, they are just below the presidency, that is the presidency of the Council of Ministers. So we started working based on those 2 laws, and that allow us to leverage and work on the crisis of the pandemic. And the second area was technology, and also the privacy, because as my colleague stated, Luana, we also have threats, and we had over 2 million of cyber attacks. 1 out of 3 users on the internet are children. So according to UNICEF data. So this raised a red flag of each of the actions we needed to take to progress on digital transformation. So technology and security, and the third area is focused on policies and regulations, so that gap of staff, budget, empowerment won't happen again. So, and finally, everything related to services and digital innovation. As Gina might say, in our countries, we deployed the monetary subsidies for our country. And oftentimes, that money couldn't reach out physically to some places. So we leverage the digital payment. The IDB report stated that 28% of people have indicated that they have made any digital transaction privately or with the government before the crisis, and 61% after the crisis, after COVID, after the pandemic. So in our countries, and this is what we're working on in Peru, is that we need to focus now and in the future of the rights and responsibilities of safe transactions in the digital world. And we are almost 30 million citizens. And in the remote areas, we've had the problems of lack of connectivity, but we've been working on it, trying to deploy along with international cooperation. And in general lines, we've been trying to work out some solutions for the overall citizens. And another topic I feel it's important in Peru, there are over 40,000 public services available. Just like Brazil, we have gov.pe, which is the unique digital platform for citizens, over 1,600 millions views. This is where we have disseminated information for the vaccination rollout and the bonuses for citizens. So citizens have been able to access to almost 80% of the services. We are now in the transaction stage, and there is a big challenge for the use of technology, but I feel that the 61% of citizens that have already used the technology benefits will continue increasing so that we can continue expanding the number of such users. Thank you, Benjamin. Gracias.
And talk about the connectivity issue. You referenced it a couple of times in your remarks. This, as I mentioned in my introduction, is a problem throughout Latin America, where there is this digital divide that has been very difficult to overcome. And it's become really a question of life and death for many families during the pandemic. Peru is perhaps an extreme example of the digital divide. You've talked about all the Peruvians who've been able to take advantage of these digital tools. I'm curious about what efforts you've made to make sure that other Peruvians are also able to access services in a time where in-person transactions have been often difficult or impossible.
Bien, efectivamente, tenemos una dificultad geográfica.
Yeah, we have a geographic difficulty in Peru. In the jungle part of Peru is still a big challenge for connectivity, and in the remote villages in the rural areas. Therefore, for education, for instance, we deployed a whole framework called Aprendo en Casa, or I Learned at Home, which is a hybrid event that is not only did we use the internet, but also radio and TV, so we could reach out the most remote places so that we could bring educations to home. The same thing applies for the health care services. I feel every country was focused on saving lives due to the pandemic, but there are other diseases that needed to be cared for. So we made efforts on the telehealth, and likewise, we were trying to bring those telehealth in places where it was possible. At the beginning of this year, there was an urgent decree that enabled a budget for providing public accesses of location that is like parks that provided free connectivity where we could keep our distance and prevent getting infected, so that the internet could be we've been working to make internet become a right for the citizens, but there is the connectivity is not only an effort that can come from the government, but also it's a joint effort from the public and the private sector so that we can close the gap.
You, Gina Villafañe, Coordinadora en Ciencias de la Información, who is a last-minute replacement from the government of Panama, but an excellent one, and I think we're very fortunate to have you, Gina, here. So first of all, welcome, and thank you for joining this conversation. I want to talk to you about the financial side of this connectivity. Marushka mentioned the absolute importance of making sure that these emergency social supports went to families, including unbanked families, families that hadn't previously accessed financial technologies or fintech. And also what I've referenced earlier in the introduction, which was the support for small and medium-sized enterprises that also desperately needed emergency assistance. I want to talk to you about in Panama, how you have adapted the ways that you reach small and medium-sized businesses and families in need of government support in ways that you did not only a year and a half ago.
Thank you, Benjamin. Nice to meet you. I apologize on behalf of Luis Oliva. He wanted to be here, but I appreciate that you welcome me on his behalf. Yes, indeed, like Marushka mentioned earlier, and I apologize for my rusty English. I'm dusting it. Yeah, we face many challenges regarding financial inclusion during the pandemic. And so what Panama government focused on and is still developing is the making our ID, national ID, physical national ID as an instrument, a financial instrument. So we could use that to make purchases, to deposit this financial relief to our citizens. And this is a program that I think we're gonna keep until next year, probably.
And so tell me, Gina, just in terms of the use of this technology in the future, why do you consider this a technology that you'll not continue using? It's a question I'm going to have for Luana and Marushka as well, which is, what of these new tools and services might exist after the pandemic? I'm curious, Gina, about this service with the national ID as a financial technology and similar services. Do you think they will continue? Should they continue to be available to Panamanians in the post-pandemic period?
I think the technology for sure is going to be continuously used, but I don't think it's going to be used for the relief purposes, as we are working currently to make again the economic process on a move. We want to reestablish all the economic movement right now. So we are working with the QR code, the safe mobility code, so people can go again and purchase and feel safe on a social environment. So that's that we are focusing right now. So we are working to reduce this emergency relief, because this was approached as an emergency situation because of the pandemic. We want the economy to be again on track. And so for sure the technology will be there for other purposes. For example, the scholarships that we manage with our students. So I think it's not the technology, but the purpose that we're going to use it.
Excellent. And many thanks to you. Let me remind everyone that you are invited to, and I insist that you participate in today's conversation. Please send us your questions on Twitter in a direct message or by tagging @LATAMPROG, LATAMPROG, or simply send an email to lap@wilsoncenter.org, lap@wilsoncenter.org. Luana, back to you. My question is about the medical response, the public health system using digital tools in a way that perhaps government agencies had not in the past. I mean, some of these are obviously particular to the pandemic response. I'm thinking of vaccine registration, contact tracing applications, versions of a vaccine passport, but then also things like telemedicine. So my question is, Luana, how did the provision of public health care change in Brazil during this difficult 18 months, almost 20 months? And again, the question that I asked Gina, how do you expect some of those practices to outlast the pandemic and continue to be available to Brazilians into the future?
Well, thank you, Benjamin. Well, to answer this question, I would like to complement what I said before, talking a little bit about GovBRID, the app that we had that helps the identification of people and the access of the access to the digital services as well. So we have evolved. We had already a previous version before the pandemic, but we have evolved a lot this app during the last months. So in this app and this account, actually, we have the app, but also we can access at websites. It provides a secure and universal login for every services at a federal level, and also from the other levels for different for the other entities that we have in Brazil, in our republic. And this solution also offers biometric identity validation, so it helps a lot also in health systems and for the doctors also that need to provide the services as well. It offers also a possibility for personal data and privacy management, so it is reliable and people have information of how the data is used and all the conditions and terms that are inside the use of the solution. It is also a digital wallet for all the credentials and other documents that people might have. And it also offers a digital signature for documents. So it is an important entry for people to the digital world of digital services provided by government. So it's a way to authenticate in a very secure manner for both citizens and also the managers of all this public policy. So it is an important tool that to fight pandemic, and it was being built before, and it's evolving a lot in this period. So it helped us, for example, the biometric validation helped us a lot in social security during pandemic. During pandemic, it's important to mention that it changed a lot the journey of user of social security, because agencies were closed for a long time, and people still needed to request for benefits, for pensions, and even to prove that they were still alive to keep receiving their benefits. So the biometric validation helped us to do that, and it was released during pandemic, so it helped a lot. And the proportion of people who used to request social benefits was around 90% physical before pandemic, and it's now like almost 70% online. It changed a lot. We have 90 out of 96 public services of security offered online now. And it helped a lot also the health aspect that you mentioned and you asked. Now we also have an app, Connect SUS, which is a very important one, where users and also the health professionals can access the health records, both from the private and public services provided. And also everyone can access their records on vaccination, immunization, need for transplant, medicines that they require from our public system, and all the things are offered online now. And well, I would end my talk also mentioning the emergency aid that it was provided by Brazil, and it was built in 30 days, and it reached more than 60 million families, and it was all provided, it was completely provided online as well. And I think all this, the emergency aid brought a lot of people that did not have bank accounts. So it is an important benefit of this, that we now have a bigger population with these accounts. And I really believe that all those tools will remain and will still be used to offer better services to public, and especially to put a state closer to our citizens.
Thank you, Luana. Marushka, Luana spoke various times about systems to guarantee privacy and cybersecurity in a lot of these new services being offered online, including some innovative biometric systems. You, when you were giving your initial remarks, emphasized repeatedly that with increased digitalization comes increased risks, and even mentioned some pretty disturbing statistics about the number of cyber attacks that the Peruvian government has faced online over the last pandemic period. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the efforts that you've made to address this. Earlier in our Going Digital seminars, we've talked a lot about cybersecurity and privacy and about the risk that all these new Latin Americans who've joined the online world could easily revert back to previous practices if they don't feel their privacy is being protected, if they feel vulnerable on the cybersecurity front. So Marushka, talk a little bit about how Peru has addressed those issues.
Bien, creo que este tema de la privacidad y de la
All right, I think that the private and data protection digitally is a topic and a concern that has been there before the pandemic, and it's being more permanently during the pandemic crisis. And I feel that it has already scaled up in the authorities, in all other citizens. And from that point of view, at the end of 2019, there was a digital transformation laboratory in Peru. And along this laboratory, private and public sectors have worked together to make progress on what you initially stated. Governments did not have enough staff to make a response in the crisis, but different experts started to collaborate. So under that sense, we launched, for example, what other countries did as well, which was like the contact tracing platforms and applications where you could visualize the hotspots of infections. And it was welcomed by the citizens because the citizens accepted the privacy policies, because at the same time we were protecting the data, but we were also protecting and caring for the health. And it is important to note that we launched the national service called COVID-19, and we're looking at using it for another phase of the COVID-19, and we use IA and short codes. And why was that? Not every Peruvian is connected online, and not every Peruvian has or owns a smartphone. So we did this government Peru. You would receive a text message and you would make sort of a digital triage, and that would be uploaded to a platform. So we were able to reach out even the most remote places to find out whether there was a citizen or not who was having any symptoms of COVID. Now, an important part is that open data was shared to the private sector as well, so that they could get enough supplies for the different needs that there were for COVID-19. And hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it might not be the first or last pandemic, but we will continue working under that line. Another important part was to launch those work permits that were issued during the lockdown, because there were some basic needs and frontliners that needed to go to work. So these work permits were digitally issued, and we're going to continue working on a developed software along with the private sector so that we can create these with other types of applications. Likewise, we have the digital vaccination card, and it's important to mention that a couple of weeks ago, we, under the Pacific Alliance partnership, we launched this digital part that, along with different countries and with the effort of the IADB, we will start accepting these digital vaccination cards. The project is very advanced, and I'm pretty sure that we, as countries of Latin America, will have very good news. And finally, all inquiries, all questions, services work with the citizens. We visited all vaccination centers to find out how people move around to ask questions in the vaccination centers, and that has been built up digitally. And we have the big challenge of privacy. This is why we request the minimum data that is necessary, because the rest of it is retrieved from the government information, so that people can accept the privacy policies, because the privacy policies is a whole change from the private and the public sector. And this is what I can say about that.
You could talk a little bit more about this vaccine card, the vaccine passport concept, particularly in the idea of coordination between governments in the region. We've talked about this as well in previous Going Digital events. And there is a challenge of coordinating policies on any issue, but particularly on issues of data transfer and privacy and mobility. What, if any, conversations has your team had with your counterparts elsewhere in the region? And if it's helpful, feel free to speak to Luana and Gina right now, to facilitate the use of vaccine cards for travel in the region and outside, an issue that you've just referenced as quite important in the next phase of this pandemic.
Bueno, se ha conformado un grupo de trabajo.
Well, there's a working group. We hold meetings every Monday of all countries involved. It's an effort with all of these countries, along with the IDB, and there are officials responsible of the Ministry of Health and officials responsible of the Secretary of Digital Transformation. So we have two topics: health and data, which are exclusive to the Ministry of Health, but at the same time, recognizing and acknowledging the digital transformation, because my part will be available on my cell phone, and that same document is being leveraged, that once we are reactivated and we overcame the crisis, even though there are still other variants, that will help us have access to some places. Like, for example, there was soccer event, so people needed to bring their vaccination card with them. So the idea again is to standardize the ID usage in the Pacific Alliance in all Latin American countries. And I feel that given that because there are set timelines, I'm pretty sure that we will soon have this international vaccination card.
These technologies after the acute phase of the pandemic. Thank you, Mariuszka. Gina, I wanted to talk to you about an issue I referenced earlier, which was whether governments in Latin America, including in Central America and Panama in particular, have been putting enough resources into the secretaries of digital innovation, right? These relatively new agencies that require and sometimes have to compete with the private sector for digital talent, and to make sure that the teams there are able to support this rapid expansion of government services online. I think now there's no question that it's important. I think earlier some governments had created these secretarias, but maybe didn't put in sufficient budget and personnel to make sure they could succeed. So Gina, tell me maybe the story in Panama, but also your impressions in the region as you get to know other secretaries of digital innovation and other government technology experts throughout Latin America.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's amazing how similar our challenges are in regards to technology and development. In Panama, the AIG, la Autoridad Nacional para la Innovación Gubernamental, has around 20 years, but recently, I think less than 10 years, it was created as a secretary. It was an authority. Our plans for the future are to make it even bigger, to have it recognized as a ministry. For sure, the pandemic caught us off guard, and it's been quite difficult, but we are so blessed to have an incredible team of engineers, devoted engineers that have been working around the clock for several months to be able to rise to the occasion and deliver all the services, these digital services that mean, when I look at the amount of work that we have done to be able to give, not only with the Ministry of Health, to give traceability resources and capabilities to the Ministry of Health during the pandemic, but also the vaccination program, which is called PanaVac here in Panama. We've worked intensively with them in being able to plan for specific groups, because we have, and I think in Peru and Brazil is the same, we had small amounts of vaccines coming into our country, different brands, different manufacturers, and we had to be able to be sure that we were able to deliver those at least twice, in the case of Pfizer vaccine, to the most recónditos lugares of our country, right? So yes, so we work hand in hand with the Ministry of Health to be able to give them geospatial intelligence for the planning of these groups, special groups, and to be able to prioritize them. Then with the digital registry of vaccination, we had to work in this change of paradigm, which is being able to translate the analogic way of doing things in paper with the paper records, and have the nurses and all the medical staff embrace the new technology. We use PDA devices to record these vaccination applications in every part of our country, even the remote places which have no connectivity at all. And so it's been quite a challenge. Right now we are working, as I mentioned before, on the QR code. Recently we had that recognized as an equivalent certificate, digital certificate by the European Union. So our citizens can now travel safely back and forth, and likewise with the European citizens. And now we need to start working, embracing other, making the same equivalencies with QR codes in Latin America. And so also another important thing was, as you mentioned, and Marushko also addressed, the privacy issues. So we recently had a new privacy law, protection of private information law. I think it went on March this year. And so it's quite recent for us. And we had to be able to understand it and to applicate and to implement that into all the technology that we developed for the pandemic. Having the consent, the informed consent of the public to be able to manage this data. The curious thing in Panama is, of course, this data is the responsibility of the Ministry of Health, but we are managing the systems and the databases. So it's an extra responsibility on us to be able to do it by the law, and assure the citizens that those information are going to remain private, and the minute they want to have them deleted or given to them, they're going to have it available. So yes, I think it's quite similar, our rights in this pandemic.
Many thanks, Gina. Luana, I referenced in my introductory remarks the challenge that governments like private companies face in moving their own workforce online. And that's something we haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet. The government in Brazil is enormous, given the size of the country and the sophistication of the government ministries. I wonder if you could tell me a bit of what it was like from your perspective to make sure that the Brazilian government could suddenly be telecommuting. And again, with very little lead time or warning that this might be necessary. And again, similar to my earlier question, how much of the government would you say was already prepared to do that? And others who just turned to you and your team and said, allow us to perform our critical functions from home and make those changes overnight. What was that experience like, if you could recall back to the early days of last March?
Well, in fact, we have a very big structure, and we are, as you said, we have a sophisticated structure, and before the pandemic, we were not ready. I think no one was ready for this. but we were thinking a lot about the digital transformation, but we were not ready to work from home and to accomplish all the tasks that we were doing by them. But we actually, I think we were not thinking about it because we didn't have the urge to do that pandemic brought us. But I really think that we managed to reach that point, and we spend a long time, many months working from home and preparing the structure and trying to acquire the capabilities to do that. It was not easy, and I think it was not easy for government and not easy for private sector as well. But we managed to do that. We prepared the structure. People started working from home, and I think we'll still think about all the results and the effects of all this change that we had. Another point was that most of the people, if they were not thinking about going to digital, they had to manage to do that. We have to had teachers doing that, doctors doing that, and many other professions that had to start working from a different point of view and managing to reach and to deliver the best results as possible from their works. And I think we are now completely different. We advanced many years that we wouldn't. Concerning this point, the way we work, the way we think, and we plan to work with digital. I think it's a path of no return, I think, but there are some gains, but also some things that we have to think to make it better. And especially when the pandemic began, and I think we will have a lot of learnings from this whole situation.
Thank you, Luana. We have just about 8 minutes left in our conversation. I'm going to give everyone one more opportunity to speak. And if you permit me, I'd like to ask you your number one priority for the next phase of digital government. I think you guys have all very persuasively talked about the preparations that you had in Brazil and Panama and Peru before the pandemic, a lot of the catch up that you're able to do in a remarkably short period of time. My question is, what's next? There are obviously a lot of priorities for digital government. There are still public services only available in person and with paper. There are still, we've talked in Peru, Marushka, many Peruvians who don't have the access to the internet they need to take advantage of the efforts that have been made. Luana, there are still sectors of the economy maybe resistant to permanently being online, whether that's telemedicine or telecommuting. And so my question, will start with you, Marushka, go to you, Gina, and end with you, Luana. Is your number one priority for the next phase of this transition to digital government in Latin America?
Benjamín, sin duda alguna, la prioridad número uno es...
Undoubtedly, the priority is to ensure the digital access, not only the connectivity, but the digital environment, that is devices, data, at 100% for all citizens in Peru. And I feel that there are 4 items here. Try to provide a national platform of telework, because there's no going back. We are all used to working remotely. And secondly, a digital talent platform where we are all included. That is skills, capacity building, where and do not lower the guard for the open data. This has been with us, and this needs to be still here because it's a maximum example of transparency, and to continue working under the international standards, and in the case of Peru, to approve the digital transformation and go to the next step, which is digital governance. And that is in favor of all the citizens in Peru. Thank you.
Thank you, Marushka. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gina.
Yes, as Marushka said, I mean, we want to expand the services that we offer right now. end to end. We want to make them digital for our citizens. We are willing to work in digital prescriptions. Also, we have a project on that. Building capacity for sure, not only for the Ministry of Health, but also other institutions in our country. Building confidence in our citizens, that they are able to just approach every other aspect of their services that they have with the government, their health, through our digital platforms, which, by the way, are free for them. They don't consume any kind of data, which I think is wonderful. So keep working also on open data sets, to be able to provide the scientific community in our country, and also the entrepreneurs data to be able to develop and research. So yes, those are our main focuses right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks to you, Gina. Luana, we'll conclude with the same question for you. If you had President Bolsonaro's ear to ask for support, new resources, or a new direction in policy, what's the top priority for the continued digitalization of government in Brazil?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we will really focus on the complete digital transformation of public services. And now we have reached a lot of a high proportion of them that are already digitalized. And now we have started working with some portfolio of projects that are more strategic ones, and they need more support and more attention and efforts for them. We have around 20-25 projects that are very big ones, and they are very focused on quality and to provide a very transformative experience for citizens. Then our aim is to include artificial intelligence in some services, or to create new services that didn't exist before, or to join some services to provide a better experience. Then our main priority here is to focus on quality and on projects that have a huge impact for society, with saving even more money, and offering a very good experience for people, and also having a good social impact out of them. That's our main focus right now, and always using good technology and tools to provide this new experience for people.
Excellent. Luana, Gina, Marushka, this has been a spectacularly important conversation and fascinating for me. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Thank you for the work that you've been doing in Brazil, in Panama, in Peru, setting, I think, a really powerful example, which is why we brought you here, for the rest of the region as it grapples with these enormous demands from the public for public services that are available digitally, while it's still difficult to access them in person, and for setting an example of how government services can be efficiently delivered digitally, even when the public health situation does not require it. I want to thank again our audience for being part of this and for your questions and interest. I want to thank our sponsors at Amazon Web Services for your support of this event. I want to thank everyone for your interest in our broader Going Digital series. As I said, the previous episodes are available on our website, as will this recording, including with interpretation in Spanish and English for those of you who need it. Thank you again very much for being part of this event, and we will continue to address these themes in our Going Digital series moving forward, both in the context of the pandemic and, as I referenced earlier, digitalization as part of Latin America's economic recovery and as part of the diversification of Latin America's economies, including in South America and Central America. Thank you all again, Luana, Marushka, Gina. Thank you very much. I appreciate your insights.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Obrigado. Gracias a todos.
Bye.